Laura from 1944 is a film noir directed belatedly by Otto Preminger and nominated for a few Academy Awards. It's a film that has quite the reputation, and we're going to get into why and where exactly it sits in the film noir kind of criteria this week on the Golden Hour Film Podcast. Hello and welcome to episode 28 of the Golden Hour Film Podcast. I am your host, Shane Mulvaney, with my co-host, Harry Bailey. How are you doing, Harry?
Very good. Yeah, it's Noir-vember. Get it? So we've 5 Fridays in November, and we are covering film noir every Friday. I'm pretty excited because I had a great time putting together all the cases for you to solve, for you to try and figure out what each week's episode is going to be. Congratulations if you figured out that this week's one was Laura. My hat off to you. Literally, I'm not wearing a hat. How are you, Shane?
Yeah, I'm doing pretty well. Like I said, it's the latest arc we're embarking upon here, so Noir-vember. It is the first of 5 film noirs we're going to be doing this month. And like I said, this is directed by Otto Preminger. It's starring Dana Andrews. It's starring Gene Tierney and Clifton Webb. Clifton Webb, by the way, nominated for an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role, his really acclaimed performance as Waldo. And we're going to get into the
not an easy guy to get into this film either. I don't know if you heard about how much of a pain in the hole he was to try and convince to be in the movie.
Long story short. Go on, go ahead.
Yeah, no, long story short, basically, in the 30s he was like a megastar to begin with, but then, because he was such a good tap dancer, but then Fred Astaire blew the rest of them out of the water. Who the hell is Clifton Webb? And basically the studio had a whole list of people who they wanted to hire for the movie, and Preminger stepped in. The funniest one is that one of them had literally just played Jack the Ripper, and they wanted him to play the killer. And Otto Preminger was like, lads, everyone's gonna know who the murderer is if you hire Jack the Ripper for this movie. We need to hire people who nobody has a previous opinion on. So he obviously, Otto Preminger being Otto Preminger, he's a savant of cinema, knew who Clifton Webb was, and was like, I want Clifton Webb. And Clifton Webb said, I'm not auditioning for your movie. I'll just do a scene from the stage show that I'm currently doing, and if you like it, you can hire me, and if you don't, you can fuck off. Also, I'm not flying out to you, you fly over to me. And they did it, and he was great, so they hired him because of how good he was at delivering his lines.
Yeah, it's a great performance from Clifton Webb. Really chews up the scenery in his role as Waldo. Waldo, by the way, is the character who narrates the film. And originally it was supposed to be 3 narrators. There's supposed to be narration from Waldo, from Laura herself, played by Gene Tierney, obviously, and from Dana Andrews, who plays Detective Mark McPherson. But then they obviously made the decision to just stick with Waldo. And I think it's actually a really effective decision because it helps to keep Laura mysterious for most of the picture as well. And Mark, you're never quite sure what he's thinking either. So I think the fact that Waldo is the person who you're most kind of looking at Laura's, like kind of viewing Laura through his eyes, are really, really kind of, it does make her kind of seem like more of an enigma, I think. But yeah, the film is directed by Otto Preminger. He wasn't actually originally the director. It was actually supposed to be directed by a guy called Ruben Mamoulian, another kind of acclaimed director of the time. And he had actually shot a couple of weeks on the film, but there wasn't really working out. Otto Preminger was attached as a producer. He was the person who kind of bought the rights to the original book and kind of developed it. And because he wasn't particularly in Darlef Zanuck's, the studio head, because he wasn't particularly in Darlef Zanuck's good graces, he wasn't initially kind of brought on as a director, but once they kind of were seeing the dailies coming in and it wasn't exactly what they were expecting the film was going to be, they did fire Ruben Mamoulian, and Zanuck would eventually then install Otto Preminger as director. Pretty funny that Mamoulian's wife actually did this painted portrait of Gene Tierney as Laura. And they actually ended up kind of discarding that. So the portrait we see of Laura is like more of a photograph, kind of like more of it's not a portrait, a painted portrait anyway. They kind of discovered it almost to just fully kind of dispense with Mamoulian's kind of fingerprints on the film. But that's how Preminger would come to direct the film, not just produce it, and it's the first of 6 film noirs that Preminger would direct in the film noir kind of genre between 1944 and 1952. So yeah, it was kind of his return to directing after a brief absence. Like I said, the film nominated for several Academy Awards. Direction for Preminger himself, best writing screenplay, best art direction, interior direction, black and white, and like I said, best supporting actor for the aforementioned Clifton Webb. So yeah, we'll get into a quick spoiler-free review. I had seen the film before and I really enjoyed it, and yeah, second time around I enjoyed it even more, to be honest with you. Yeah, I think everything just kind of hits more, especially there's a certain point in the film where your expectations of what you're going to see changes drastically. But yeah, we'll get into that as we talk about the film. But yeah, I enjoyed it even more the second time around once you kind of know exactly what the film is trying to do. So how about yourself, Harry? What's your spoiler-free review of Laura?
Yeah, so I feel like this hasn't happened often on the podcast, where it's a film that you've seen and I haven't. I think
Only
the only
two or
other
three
one
times, yeah.
also had Otto Preminger
Yeah.
in it, which was Stalag 17. Go watch that episode. And yeah, I thought it was amazing. I love film noir, and I don't know how I hadn't seen Laura until now. I think it's really interesting that it's a film noir set with the upper class of the inner city, because often with film noir you're dealing with like
dregs
beat
of
cops
society.
or yeah, shady cops who are like on their last legs, or just gangsters or whatever. And yeah, this is high society as far as the 40s goes. So for it to be not necessarily a spoiler because it is the first thing we hear, such a brutal murder in such a lavish apartment is very fascinating. It's got one of my favorite noir twists ever, and this is a spoiler-free review, so that's all I will say. But essentially, it plays out as a whodunit, and it's probably, as far as whodunits goes, it's one of my favorite I've seen. I absolutely love this film. I thought it was exceptional. It is 88 minutes long, and it genuinely felt like about a 25-minute movie. It flew by. It was incredible. I would only wish to see this on a big screen. That is my one wish for the next time I see Laura. But I absolutely loved the film. Fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. It's also got our girl Judith Anderson as Anne Treadwell, who's the
Legend.
aunt of Gene Tierney's character. But yeah, we've covered her in the very first episode we've ever done as Mrs. Danvers in Rebecca. So yeah, shout out to her. Another good performance here from
Yeah.
her.
Shout out to anyone who remembers us covering that as well.
Yeah.
If you've been here since episode 1, fair play to you. What are you doing? In all seriousness, though, if you are new here, though, do subscribe. Because I did see 80-something% of people who watch the podcast these days are not subscribed. So please
really?
do. Subscribe.
Yeah, that'll be a big help for sure. But yeah, I think we might as well get into the actual film itself now. So we open up with an image of Laura, like I said, a big portrait of Laura, not the hand-painted one from Ruben Mamoulian's wife, but obviously they went in a different direction. But then we see the score kicking in then, and actually the score, by the way, wasn't nominated for an Oscar, but it was so popular that the studio basically had a bunch of recordings recorded, and they were released, and like it was really popular. People were buying them off the shelves left, right and centre.
Frank Sinatra
really
did a
popular.
cover of it.
Yeah, like it's a really, really popular
It was a big deal.
instrumental score. It's a big deal, exactly. So then we hear the voice of Waldo, played by Clifton Webb, and he tells the story of how Laura died that weekend. He says that he was the only one who really knew Laura, and he decided then, because he's a writer, he's a very, very acclaimed kind of high society writer. He writes a lot about kind of what's going on in society and stuff like that, and he's a really powerful influence, kind of similar to J.J. Hunsaker in Sweet Smell of Success. He kind of has a similar kind of status, I would say, in society. But yeah, that's, if you've seen that episode, kind of think along those lines.
I think it's also fitting that a guy with that job is the guy who narrates the film.
Yeah.
Because as we come to kind of learn throughout the film, every character saw Laura in a different light.
Yeah.
So technically, I guess you could have had anyone narrate it, because everyone else was going to disagree with their account anyway. But I just thought it was pretty cool that it actually was a guy similar to JJ Hunsaker, like a guy who wants his voice to be heard is the narrator. I thought that was a clever touch.
Yeah, and he's very used to having his voice heard as well. So that's, yeah.
Yeah.
And then we talk about then, so basically Detective Mark McPherson, played by Dana Andrews, arrives, one of the kind of big film noir actors of the 1940s, especially in his work with Otto Preminger. He arrives and his attention is immediately drawn to the clock. There's a clock in the kind of living room of Waldo's apartment, and Waldo's in the bath, I think he is. He's kind of... Yeah, he's obviously just kind of chilling. He's kind of mulling over what could have happened to Laura, and he's trying to work some stuff out. But yeah, Mark's attention is drawn to this big clock, which could potentially, who knows, come back later. And then Waldo then Waldo recalls to Mark and the audience, obviously, the statement that he gave to the other detectives. So he's saying, "I already spoke to the detectives, lad. I don't know why you're here, really." And then Mark then is saying to Waldo, "Look, the report that you gave about a murder years ago, the cause of death seems pretty similar to what actually happened to Laura in this instance. What do you have to say about that? Because, yeah, if he kind of knew of a really, really grisly death that someone was, he reported on a grisly death that someone happened to someone years ago, like that could be a potential kind of suspect in this murder." And Waldo,
what was suspicious about it was the fact that Waldo reported that this person was shot with a double barrel shotgun with buckshot in it, when in fact the guy was actually like hit over the head or something. Instead, he reported it wrong. That's what aroused his suspicion, that he described Laura's murder word for another guy, but that guy didn't even die that way. So why did he have this image in his head?
Exactly. And then Waldo then kind of glosses over that, and he's saying, look, I occasionally kind of get things wrong, but he then basically invites himself into the inner circle of Mark, and he kind of invites himself along to Mark's interrogations of other suspects. I don't really know why Mark would agree to this. Like, he's not a police officer, but anyway, for whatever reason, he does allow him to. So they do kind of go to visit Anne Treadwell, who, like I said, played by Judith Anderson, is Laura's aunt. Waldo, by the way, saying that Laura considered him the kindest, gentlest, nicest person in the world. But Mark does believe that Waldo was in love with her. Again, another potential motive for why Waldo could have killed Laura. So when they do go to visit Anne, they do kind of establish again the cause of death. And Mark believed that Anne may have actually been in love with Laura's fiancé, Shelby, played by Vincent Price. But yeah, Anne kind of again, because she gave a bunch of money to Shelby that she never really asked for, and she was kind of covering up a lot of payments in the last days leading up to Laura's death. So again, potentially 2 or 3 different suspects already, which is exactly what you want in a film noir, in a whodunit. It's exactly what you want. Then Shelby,
then big old suspicious Shelby rocks in, having been in the aunt's house the whole time, not suspicious at all. And he's a funny character. I think Vincent Price plays him really well. There's something so off about him from the get-go. Even though he comes across very genuine. There's this underlying feeling, and it's through Vincent Price's acting that
it's so good.
He's too nice to the detective. There's something not right, because straight away he's like, "Oh my god, what can I do to help? Ask me anything. I'll answer anything. I can help you. Let me come with you. Let's go to places. I'll help you." So, and all Detective McPherson says is, "So where were you the night Laura was murdered? Where were you?"
Lies.
And instantly gets caught in a lie. "Oh, I was at a concert. Oh, what did they play? Beethoven's Ninth and some other thing." "Oh, right, okay. And he just keeps it in his mind, and it's a good thing. It's part of Dana Andrews' performance. He's a class actor. You haven't seen the Oxbow incident, have you?
No, I haven't seen the Oxbow incident.
That is a amazing movie. That movie is amazing. Him and Henry Fonda. It is so grisly. It is such a dark movie, and the two of them are fantastic in it. He's a class actor, but in this film, he's far less caricature-y film noir. He's far more subtle, I think, and I think he does it
100%.
really well, because a lot of the times, where your caricature-y detective film noir would take out his big sketch pad and write it down, you can almost watch Detective McPherson make these mental notes. So, and he may take out his sketch pad and just very subtly, but it's more about the look in his eyes, and he's kind of looking around, and you can tell he's made a mental note of this concert for some reason. And he's like, right, well, lads, I reckon we go and have a look at Laura's apartment. And of course, the two lads are more than willing to join him.
Yeah.
So as the three lads are leaving, you see the two go first, Waldo and Detective McPherson, and it's a real subtle thing. But as he's leaving, Shelby just puts his hand on Anne's shoulder, and she kind of they hold hands for a brief second, just as the shot ends, and none of the other characters in the shot would have seen it. It's very subtle, but it's just a little bit of extra. Something's not right about these guys. They get to Laura's apartment, and Detective McPherson puts on a record, and Shelby says, "Oh, it's not quite classical, but Laura definitely liked it." And he goes, "Oh, so you know a thing or two about music?" And he goes, "I don't know a lot about anything, but I know
A
a
little
little
about
about everything."
everything, yeah.
And he says, "Oh, that's interesting. If you know a little bit of music, then why did you say that they played Beethoven's Ninth and that other thing when they actually didn't play either of those at the concert you were at? They played an entirely different
Yeah, at the very last minute
selection
they
of songs."
changed the set list
Yeah.
at the very last second, yeah.
And he was like, "Oh, I fell asleep." And instead of just jumping on that, Dane Andrews' character is just like, "Oh, right, okay." Just kind of makes a note of that. But yeah, Waldo Lydecker is far more wanting to just. He hates Shelby
He
so
hates
much.
Shelby with a
He hates
passion.
Shelby so much,
He al-
and he just outright accuses him. He's like, "You murdered
Yeah,
her."
he already claimed a bit earlier that Laura was in two minds about whether to actually marry Shelby. That's kind of why Shelby may have wanted to kill her, because he kind of a crime of passion kind of situation. And then yeah, he doesn't warm to Shelby whatsoever. So again, potentially Mark has the right idea where he's maybe realizing that Waldo has stronger feelings for Laura than he's letting on. But anyway, straight after this scene, then we cut to the restaurant where Waldo and Detective Mark are having dinner, and Waldo's just recounting some more stories about kind of how we got to know Laura. So we get a flashback scene where we finally see Jean Tierney in the role, kind of properly for the first time, and she spots Waldo across the restaurant, and yeah, because she's like a lowly kind of a junior executive in kind of the advertising business, she sees Waldo and she decides to pitch him on this idea that she has, because obviously he's quite like JJ Hunsaker in Sweet Smell of Success. He's able to influence public opinion very, very quickly and very effectively. So she goes over and she's trying to tell him about this pitch, but he's quite rude and he's quite dismissive. And he says his lunch is more important than Laura's career, which is a kick to the guts for her. And she says that she feels sorry for him, and that she says, "You're a lonely man," kind of thing. But then he says, something in me I realised I needed to see her again. So he goes to her place to work, and he kind of barges in, and he effectively apologises and says, ordinarily he's not without a heart. He says, "Should I produce X-ray pictures to prove it?" Like, he has these really, really great one-liners splintered throughout.
It's quite. It feels like it was written by Billy Wilder.
Yeah.
It's there's so many quips and one-liners and just very unique dialogue in the film, and it just works the whole way through. It's pretty quintessential like noir writing.
And
There's a
Clifton
lot of
Webb,
characters in noir films talk in
these
catchphrases
ways,
almost.
and Clifton Webb really, really chews up the scenery. Like I said, it's so many great little line deliveries. Like, it's one thing kind of, you can have a great line on the page, but it's really a skilled actor it will take then to obviously kind of get the most out of it, get the most juice out of it. So he apologizes, and she accepts, but then she tells him to leave. So Waldo finally says, "I'll endorse your pen." She had obviously pitched him a pen at the restaurant. He says, "I'm gonna endorse your pen," and that then makes Laura warm to him. So that's kind of how they become friends. And then he talks about how he introduced her to other big clients. But he says, look, she had a great work ethic. She had a great mind. So as much as I kind of gave her an in a lot of these places, it's her kind of own talent that would see her climb the ranks very quickly in her job. But he says she deferred to his judgment a lot as well. So he then says again, wherever we went, she stood out. Men admired her, women envied her. Again, kind of Wallo's painting a picture of Laura as this like ethereal figure, someone who, someone like a very very graceful figure who men and women alike couldn't help but be drawn to, and
She's
just
like an enigma.
exactly enigmatic. She just stands out in any room whatsoever. Again, we've seen a few times already that the portrait. And,
Yeah, the portrait is like one of my favorite symbols, probably in any film we've covered on the podcast. It's so great because even the way they light the portrait, where there is a bit of a glow around her face, it just goes to show that she's such an interesting character, and she's dead.
Yeah, she obviously is dead.
Yeah.
So then he says they spent every day together, but until a couple of weeks ago when she cancelled her appointment, which never happened before. And he said he felt betrayed. And then he went to her apartment and he saw through the window that she wasn't actually alone. She was with a man called Jacobe, who was the person who painted that picture of Laura. He was the person who did that. So again, he makes Laura out to be, Jacobe's portrait makes Laura out to be a very, very enigmatic figure. And so I think Waldo reads between the lines and understands there's probably more there than just a simple portrait painting. There's probably a bit more of a romantic connection there.
I think at this point as well, it's safe to say that although Waldo was the initial narrator, now, especially when he like shows up outside our house, there's now, the film's so good at giving you these like underlying feelings. There's just something a bit
really off about him.
Yeah, there's something a bit much about Waldo because you can appreciate that he definitely gave her the start in her career, but the way he starts to speak about her sounds more obsessive,
possessive as well.
Yeah.
Like he really thinks that she belongs to him.
Yeah. So whenever he shows up outside the house and doesn't actually make any sort of apology about it, he was like, so I went to her house because the light was on and I hung around outside to see who would come out. He says it so nonchalantly as if that's not a strange thing. So now the film really makes it hard to know who do we trust other than McPherson.
He then goes on to say because of his kind of his newspaper column and his radio and stuff like that, he writes a really scathing column on Jacobe, which turns public opinion kind of against Jacobe, and it kind of means Laura kind of breaks things off with Jacobe, and he then says he did it with
he sabotaged his whole career basically. Yeah,
exactly. So Jacobe is a victim of Waldo's kind of jealousy, and Waldo does say that it's not the only man he did that with. He'll go on to do it with a few other men. But then one night he says she met Shelby at a party, and when they get to know each other, we actually see some scenes of Shelby and Laura kind of connecting, and Waldo, you can see him across the room almost like he clocks it instantly, and straight away he doesn't want this at all. He's kind of Laura is his again, feels really really possessive of her. So
very much so.
From that point of view, or from that point on, I should say, Shelby then becomes enemy number one for Waldo.
Yeah, Shelby and him get off on the wrong foot straight away because Shelby asks Laura for a dance. Laura says, I'm with someone. And then, to cut a few references short, Shelby calls him old and Waldo calls him poor. Pretty much. So, straight away, that's like their first ever interaction and they don't get on. But pretty much then, they're at this like party where they first met. And we kind of find out a bit about Shelby. We find out a bit about Shelby. He inherited a large estate, but about 10 years ago, was it? Or was it 8 years ago, something like that? He got cut off from it, so he originally had to become a working man, but when he went to his friend for a job, the friend just laughed him out of the room because he didn't think he was being serious. So now he just kind of lives a facade that he actually is still living off of his inheritance and he is still a bit of a playboy or whatever, when in fact the well is well and truly dry. So he pretty much gets a job off Laura then and there. She shakes his hand and she says, I'll see you in the office the next working day. And good old Waldo walks in on this conversation, which feels like a pretty normal like from afar at a party you see two people shaking hands. There's nothing malicious from afar there. Waldo is pissed. He even says it in his narration. He's like, I was very good to maintain my composure because of
Yeah.
how angry I was. And he takes Laura home from the party. And the next day in work, then we see that Shelby is working for her, and he's come up with this whole campaign. He's come up with this whole campaign around this model called Diane Redfern, who Laura's like, who? And he's like, oh, she's this model who you hired about a week ago. How do you not remember Diane? You hired her a week ago. And she's like, oh, I guess I forgot or whatever. And at this point, then, you can kind of tell that things have already moved swiftly onwards with these two, because he's putting her jacket on and they're getting very close. And you can tell they have plans after work and everything. And somehow, some way, I just have a feeling that Waldo is like on top of a building with a sniper rifle just watching them somehow. He's not in the scene, but I just have a feeling he's somewhere there.
Well, he does actually start off a private investigation, his own private investigation into
As you do, yeah.
into Shelby.
Very 40s.
Yeah, exactly, which he swiftly reveals to Laura. He can't wait to reveal this information to Laura. So he says that Shelby was suspected of stealing jewels and passing fake checks some years ago. Waldo, he says that Shelby is seeing someone else called Diane Redfern, who Harry just mentioned. But then Laura reveals, we're actually getting married, Waldo. So next week we're going to get married.
Yeah.
So I don't know where you got your information from, but like, listen, I don't want to hear it, kind of thing. Waldo is like, he's having an affair with Diane. But again, Laura just, again, shuts him down and she doesn't want to hear it. So Waldo can again start to feel the control that he has over Laura starting to slip and starting to go, and he realizes she's not under his kind of influence anymore, that she's becoming her own woman, and she's not as willing to take on board his advice anymore. Maybe she's also starting to realize that it's kind of a one-way relationship where she does everything Waldo wants, but Waldo doesn't listen to what she actually has to say at all. So
yeah, at this point she doesn't even need him, because as he said, he gave her the start, but through her hard work and her character, she managed to elevate herself to a point where she has this lavish apartment with this big portrait and a maid called Bessie, who I don't think we've mentioned, who just seems like a nice woman.
Yeah, she very much does.
Actually, yeah, that's another character to trust. Bessie. She just seems nice.
Yeah, actually, Bessie, by the way, I'm not sure if we actually met Bessie. Have you met Bessie at this point?
I don't think we've met her. We'll meet her soon.
We'll meet her soon,
so
so
I don't think we've met her yet.
I'll maybe make the point I'm going to make on Bessie, but yeah. So then Laura and Waldo go to visit Anne Treadwell, and they see that Shelby is having dinner with her. And again, this kind of proves Waldo's point, he believes, because he's saying that Shelby can't be trusted, and maybe there's something going on with Anne as well, because clearly Anne is in love with Shelby, and she kind of wants him for herself.
Big time.
So yeah, Waldo says this is proof that he can't be trusted. And then we cut to a few days later when Laura kind of phones Waldo, and she says that she's going to the country for a few days to clear her head. And he says, it's the last time I ever spoke to her. So he's kind of reminiscing again. This is all happening. He's just recounting this to Mark, and obviously then Mark is the audience's proxy in this scene. So it's the last time he says that he spoke to Laura.
Yeah, and now we're more or less all caught up on at least Waldo's account of things.
Yeah.
And McPherson goes to the apartment and has a look around. He digs through her diaries. He reads some of her letters. And the maid, Bessie, shows up. And he has a couple of questions for Bessie. The one thing we heard about Bessie previously in the movie was when McPherson questioned Bessie's character in front of Aunt Anne, and Aunt Anne said, no, Bessie was actually like obsessed with Laura. Like, she just loved her to bits. You don't need to go there. She's grand. And back to where we were, and McPherson questions that there's a bottle of cheap liquor in the drinks cabinet, and Bessie was like, oh, yeah, no, that only just was there on he asks, was this here on Friday night? And she says yes initially, I believe.
Yeah.
And he says,
it wasn't when the detectives
from everything
checked it,
from every account that I've had, Laura would never drink anything cheap. Therefore, someone else was surely in the apartment with her the night she was murdered. And Bessie was like, okay, maybe it wasn't there. I don't know. I think I found it on the Saturday. I can't tell you for certain if it was there on the Friday. I just didn't want to say anything in front of anyone because I didn't want to get caught up in all this because I'm quite upset about Laura being, shotgunned in the face. And
But she also admits to destroying
again,
evidence to protect, because Laura had this this kind of persona of, again, like you said, she wouldn't drink cheap stuff, and she was kind of she was part of the kind of middle to upper class of society. She wouldn't drink this cheap stuff, so she says that she destroyed the glass and she wiped them down, the glasses down, and that's all to kind of protect the image that Laura would have wanted her to put out there. So it probably incriminates her, Bessie, meaning Bessie. It probably incriminates her and makes it look like she maybe is hiding something. But I think Detective Mark at this point he's pretty willing to accept that. Look, she wouldn't like willingly tell me that she's lying if she actually did it. Like she clearly made a mistake, and she was mistaken for actually doing that, and it kind of screwed the investigation a little bit. But she is being honest when she tells me all this. Like, she's not actually trying to hide anything.
yeah, and he just sort of makes a mental note then about the cheap drink, because that's obviously a loose end that does need to be tied up at some point. And am I right in saying at this point then Waldo just strolls back in again?
Waldo, treating Waldo, Shelby, and
just strolls back into the apartment. Now in fairness, Shelby did say Shelby said, "Oh, you invited me," and again he's just being too friendly. You invited me. You wanted to question me, interrogate me. Come on, interrogate me, please. I want to help. I want to help you so bad. Let me just interrogate me, please. I'll tell you anything you want, please. And it's just so But anyway, he shows a cheap drink to Waldo and says, "Waldo, do you want a drink of this?" And Waldo goes, I guess it'll have to do. He doesn't even really look at the bottle. And then he shows it to Shelby and says, "Shelby, do you want a drink?" And Shelby kind of quivers and he's like, "I'm not much of a day drinker." His line delivery is so good, Vincent Price, because just everything's just off. Everything. Like, even when you find out in the end, because I'm not going to spoil anything yet, but even when you find out in the end, because everybody's lying at some stage here, trust me, like when you find out the scenes where Vincent Price's character was saying the truth, he still just sounds like he's lying. Like he's just constantly shady.
He's just a constantly untrustworthy character. Like, you can't ever trust anything.
You cannot trust him at all.
Then once they kind of established the fact that the wine was brought in, that's why Detective Mark kind of invited the three of them over to see if any of them would kind of give away with their facial expressions with this wine, like you said. But then he returns to Laura's place and he looks at her portrait again and again. Probably the best cinematography, I'd say, certainly some of the best shots of the entire film in this scene.
Big time.
So, a bunch of shadows, and this place is like draped in shadows. But then he looks at the portrait, and like you said, it's like there's a glow coming from it, and you can see he's just taken with it for some reason. He just stares at it for a little bit too long, really. Like, considering he's investigating her murder, you can tell he's getting a bit attached. So you can see that he's getting more and more drawn. And then Waldo arrives and he says, he objects to Detective Mark reading the letters that he had sent to Laura, and he says that he knows that Mark has put a bid in on the portrait, which is a pretty big bomb to drop. Like, a detective making a bid in an auction, like, for a portrait on the murder suspect is actually really, really
called out.
It's really, like, inappropriate. It's so inappropriate when you think about it. So Waldo thinks that he has Mark in a voice. He says in return he wants his vase and he wants the clock, because there's two clocks. The clock that Mark initially clocked in the first place in the apartment. He said there was two of them in the whole world, and there was one in Waldo's apartment and there's one in Laura's apartment, which Waldo gave her. So he says, "I want my clock back and I want my vase back, and in return I won't say anything to anyone about the portrait. I'll let you have it." And
he suggests as well with the portrait, he's like, you are literally falling in love with a corpse. What kind of a detective are you? He's very cutthroat as Waldo. Mark
basically tells him to fuck off. He just tells him to get out. He's very dismissive of him. But then Waldo tells him to be careful. Not hard to look into that as like a very thinly veiled threat. Mark doesn't seem to pay.
He's very similar to J.J. Hunsaker. They are very similar characters.
The only thing, Waldo's willing to get dirty by himself, whereas J.J. has gophers that will do his dirty work.
And
for
as
him.
well,
That's
JJ is far more physically imposing.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, Waldo's more.
Black,
yeah,
he was a monster of a man.
yeah, he was Lord Lancaster. But then Mark falls asleep in the chair, and I think it's fair to say at this point in the film, it takes a complete 180-degree turn, and it drops again. It just drops a bomb on the audience, which I certainly wasn't expecting. And even the second time around, as much as I was expecting it, like, even then, so basically what happens is Laura enters the room.
I did not know this happened. I did not know this happens in this movie prior.
Yeah, no,
I am
it's
so glad
incredible.
as well.
So initially, I'm like, right, okay, this is some sort of dream sequence that Mark is like, he's seeing Laura, and right, there's some sort of like dream sequence where he's having a dream about Laura coming in, and maybe there's some sort of like domestic kind of bliss, kind of imagining that he's going through.
Literally, yeah.
But it becomes very, very clear, very, very quickly that that's actually not what happens, because Laura is like, who the fuck are you? Why are you in my apartment?
Yeah, why are you in my apartment?
So instantly you know that she's
alive.
This is actually legit. She is alive, which is crazy.
She actually was not shot in the face, which throws so many questions into the air. And straight away, he's just out. Where were you? Oh, I was in my house in the country.
And again,
surely you know that.
It makes it look like she's actually a suspect as well.
Now she is a huge suspect.
Maybe suspect number one.
The question is now, who the hell got shot in the face in Laura's apartment that looked like Laura? And straight away, he gets this inkling. It might have been that model.
Diane Redfern.
Maybe there was actually something to what Waldo was saying about your fiance cheating on you. Maybe it was that model, because she looked somewhat similar to you, and obviously if she got a buckshotted in the face,
you're not going to
you can forgive someone for not identifying them all the way correctly.
Yeah, exactly.
But
yeah, she goes into her closet and she says that she's found a bunch of Diane Redfern's clothes. So it becomes pretty clear that it's actually Diane Redfern who has passed away. But yeah, so instead of being the victim, she's pretty much now suspect number one in the murder, because it happened in her apartment, and she went missing for 3 days. She says that she went to the country because she wanted to kind of mull things over. But yeah, I mean, if you just killed someone, it doesn't take a stretch to kind of think that they might have gone out of Dodge for a few days, let things calm down, and then come back trying to kind of play things cool then.
Yeah, and even in the 40s, it's pretty sus that she wouldn't have heard that she was murdered. So he asks her, like, what's the crack? How did you not hear on the radio that you were murdered? How did you not read the newspaper that you were murdered? Like, you were away for days. The police even came to your house on the Saturday. What happened there? And she's like, oh, I was out on Saturday. Saturday was actually the only day I did go out. I went for a long walk in the woods to clear my head. And my radio doesn't work, and I don't get the newspaper to that house because I'm not there all the time. And it's like, oh, fair enough, I guess. But basically, he asks her not to ring anyone, not to get in contact with anyone, because he has to figure out, first of all, he has to 100% confirm who it even was that was killed in her apartment, and then he has to find their murderer.
Yeah. By the way, Laura does mention to Mark, when he's kind of getting her in this apartment scene, she does mention that she decided not to marry Shelby. So that seems to be her story for the time being. But then when Mark goes to he says don't call anyone. He says don't call anyone from your phone. But as soon as he leaves, you can see Laura she's considering calling someone. She's kind of hovering near the phone. Yeah. But then she kind of seems that she decides against it. So we get back to the precinct, and Mark is with one of his colleagues, and the colleague mentions that the medical examiner, kind of conveniently enough, has figured out that it's actually Diane Redfern's body, not Laura's. Mm-hmm. So they figured it out just about at the same time that Mark did, in case there was any confusion. So then Mark eavesdrops. They seem to have Laura's phone tapped, because he eavesdrops in on a phone call that she actually does make to Shelby.
Yeah, he did tap the phone earlier, in fairness. Yeah, he did do it in one of the scenes when he was in the apartment. He sat down and took a phone call from the precinct from his partner, and then
Tapped it.
Yeah, did
Okay,
whatever
so-
it is you do to tap a phone. Can't say I know how to do it myself, but
Nice spot. I didn't actually catch that, but yeah, he tapped the phone, which came in handy because he does manage to kind of eavesdrop in then on Laura, calling Shelby, her fiance or ex-fiance, depending on what she has to say, and they're both being very suspicious and very sneaky because he's like, not over the phone, not over the phone. We'll meet at such and such a place.
yeah.
We'll meet at Bullets, is what they say, which I think is where Laura. Laura works, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, then Mark does tail Shelby in the pouring rain, and I think they got there just at the very end of their interaction because Laura pulls off in one direction and Shelby pulls off in another. And he says to his colleague, you go follow her and I'll follow Shelby. So he follows him in the pouring rain. I might add, he follows him to a cabin in the woods somewhere. And he kind of gets in, and he comes in just as Shelby is taking down a shotgun, which seems fairly similar to the gun that was the murder weapon in the.
Yeah, it was a double barrel shotgun.
Double-barreled shotgun.
What's even more suspicious is he takes it off and he opens it and he says, "This has been fired recently,
Yeah.
and you didn't clean it. Do you know anything about guns?" And he was like, "Oh, I was shooting hair." Like, he's so suspicious.
He's so
great.
shifty.
I love his performance.
He's so shifty.
Yeah.
And you can tell that he's becoming more and more as well, becoming more and more irritated and aggressive in his. Slightly aggressive because he knows he's being caught in lie after lie after lie, and he's just like, you just fuck off, Polly. Like, he knows.
Just please leave me alone, okay? I've lied enough.
Exactly.
But, basically he sits him down and just tries and get the truth out of him, just some semblance of an actual cohesive alibi out of the man. And originally he denies stuff, but eventually what we kind of get out of him is he knew that Diane was obsessed with him and in love with him, so he wanted to break things off with her. And even though he lied and said he didn't multiple times in the film, he actually did have a spare key to Laura's apartment. He had lied about that multiple times prior to this. He used said spare key, which he stole from her office, not shady at all, to let him and Diane into Laura's apartment because he wanted to
It's so
break up with Diane.
Not even break up.
He can't help himself.
It's not even break up.
But,
I think his story is that Diane was in love with him, and he wanted to let her down gently. So he went to his girlfriend's apartment to do this, to let her down gently.
Because he didn't want to. He didn't want to do it in his own hotel because he thought that would look shady. Him bringing a girl to his own hotel, and he didn't want to do it in public. In case it didn't go well, so he thought, well, the most subtle place I can bring this girl to let her down gently is my own girlfriend's apartment. And so the doorbell rang
after 3 hours. He said they talked for 3 hours. And then after that amount of time, the doorbell rang.
Funny detail, they talked for 3 hours, and then wearing just a dressing gown, she went down to the door. Like, he can't help himself. Because that is a piece of information they just throw in there later. All she was wearing was a dressing gown, and it was Laura's dressing gown, and he just kind of goes, oh. But she goes down to the door, and I believe it is himself who says it's not that uncommon for Laura's doorbell to go at night because like she gets visitors all the time, which is why we didn't think anything of it. And he was like, now I reckon he was just being a lazy bollocks, but he was I think it would have been more shady if I answered the door, so I got her to answer the door so that it looked like it was a girl visiting a girl. I reckon he was just being a lazy bastard, just lying in bed.
But exactly,
like
clearly,
you answer the door.
Clearly, him and Diane were together that night. Okay, so there's no issue because
there was no talking over anything.
No, because Diane's clothes were in Laura's closet. Because when Laura, when Laura went to the closet, she's like, they're Diane's clothes. They're not mine. The guy is he's such a bad liar.
Can't help himself. But and he said, the door opened. He heard a bang. He said it was really dark, and he went in, and he saw her lying dead on the floor. So he just did a runner. He just freaked the fuck out and legged it. He didn't know what to do, as he seems to not know. He just did what he does throughout the entire film. He just panicked and ran. And he says, and legged it out the front door and said nothing to anyone.
He says the reason he didn't call the police is because he didn't want to bring any scrutiny on Laura.
Yeah.
I don't think so, pal. I think you're trying to save your own
I
skin.
think he was
Because
being a little bitch.
He knew how it looked. He knew how, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
but yeah, obviously Mark doesn't believe him, but he doesn't have enough to like make any kind of arrest or anything like that. So he says, don't leave town, and if you try and leave town, it's going to look bad for you. So then Mark goes back the following morning to see Laura.
Oh, you've missed a great little thing.
Go on,
Which was on the way out. This is obviously the country home that Laura had been in the last 3 days, where she couldn't hear anything, and he turns the radio on, and it works.
Oh yeah, right, yeah. That's it.
And he looks disappointed, and Shelby goes, "Why are you mad? It works." And he was like, "Exactly."
Yeah, because Laura had said that. I think she had said that it didn't work. That's how she didn't hear.
Yeah, her alibi was the radio wasn't working, which is how she didn't hear the news story of her dying. But he just had to check it on the way out. He didn't want to, but he had to, and he flicked it on, and it worked straight away.
And obviously that disappoints Mark because it's not difficult to see, he is like pretty infatuated with her at this point, and
big time.
he's like, well, look, I could actually be infatuated with an actual murderer here, like, so that's not great. So yeah, he goes back to see Laura the next morning, and when Bessie arrives, he hides behind the door because he wants to see her genuine reaction to seeing Laura for the first time, because it's like, right, if she reacts in a natural way, then I know that it's not her who killed kind of Laura. So yeah, Bessie
they almost fucking kill her.
Yeah, Bessie, she's pretty obviously surprised, and she's pretty. It's like distraught, but not in a bad distraught. Maybe there's a better word for it.
Yeah.
But
just shock. She just like her
completely
body just
shock.
shuts down.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But that satisfies Mark, was like, right, I didn't think it was her anyway, but now that I've seen her reaction, and it's
totally emotionally scarred, this woman. But he's like, yep, she's innocent, while she's like on the floor, like crying, like totally inconsolable. He's like, yeah, no, I think she might be innocent. We'll cross her off the list.
So,
and it is later on in the film as well, where Shelby's like, man, your methods are horrendous. They're not even, they're inhumane.
So who arrives at this point then but Shelby. So it seems that him and Laura have rekindled their romance, because again, Mark already knew that they were in touch, they were in contact with each other on the sly the previous night. So whatever they said to each other at Bullets, they seem to have kind of rekindled their romance, if it was ever off. Maybe they were in this thing together at this point. That's another working theory. So yeah, Mark's obviously not too pleased to see that, because again, he has feelings for Laura himself. And Shelby then, at this point, he's not even trying to hide the fact that he's a slime ball, and he's shady as hell, because he says, listen, by the way, Mark, I spoke to my lawyer, and he said that anything I said to you last night was under duress, and it can't be used against me. So it's like, you're really not helping yourself here, pal. Like, come on. And then Waldo arrives, so again, the gang are all kind of congregating together. That's one thing the film does really well, is like, it's really economical use of space, and about like, just, again, it's probably a bit on the convenient side, where again, all the suspects would converge in the same place time after time. But it does mean that you can kind of see different, like Mark is able to clock different reactions all in real time, play people off each other in certain scenes as well. So anyway, Waldo arrives and he faints when he sees Laura. So it seems that it probably wasn't him, you know what I mean? Seems that he had a normal reaction as well to Laura's death.
Yeah, he had an epileptic fit and collapsed, and just kept saying, "Oh, right pocket," because obviously he says afterwards it's a hereditary thing, that he has epilepsy. But similar to Bessie, the man just crumples to the floor when he sees her, because McPherson, personally, I kind of question your methods. They are a bit unsound, I'll be honest. That you are like emotionally scarring people, and they may never, like, what if someone just like has a psychic break? Like, Bessie thought it was a ghost when she first saw her, and she thought she had gone insane. God love her. Yeah, and then Waldo wakes up, and he says to Laura, I've arranged a party for tonight, so we're all going to celebrate the fact that you didn't get murdered, that you're not 6 feet under. We're all going to celebrate the fact that you're pretty much come back to life here. So then at this... Poor Diane, though, yeah?
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
shit one for you, Diane, but we're gonna have a party. It was only you.
We all prefer Laura, let's be honest there. So at the party, at the party, Anne, Laura's aunt again at the party, and it's probably the one great scene I'd say that Judith Anderson gets. Like, she's had a couple of nice-ish moments through, but this is one scene where she really gets to sink her teeth into it. So she's flirting with Shelby, and he kind of rebuffs her. So yeah, it seems that might actually not be anything going on there after all. It's more like a one-way kind of attraction.
I more so took it that now that Laura was back, Shelby just started shutting her down.
Yeah, okay, that's fair enough.
Because of the touch on the shoulder earlier, whenever, like, he totally instigated that.
Yeah, that's true.
I took it as he just, as soon as Laura came back, he just dropped her like a sack of bricks. He's like, actually, I don't want you anymore. So it's like the Woody meme where he's like, I don't want to play with you anymore.
That's so good actually. But yeah, Shelby says to Laura that I went to the cottage to hide the shotgun, which kind of angers her because she's like, why the fuck would you do that? Like, you're literally making yourself, what we've been saying, you're making yourself look guilty here, pal. Like, come on. So she goes into the kitchen and she starts talking to Anne, then her aunt, and Anne just pretty much straight out, she's like, yeah, look, I'm in love with Shelby, and the reason that like you two aren't suited to each other because you're such a good person, whereas the two of us are like idiots. The two of us are really bad people, selfish people. We're not nice people, and we're capable of murder.
Yeah,
that's what she kind of says. Like, we're capable of doing something like that, and you are not. That's why.
That's a kind of suspicious line, Anne.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, she doesn't say it to Mark, so she only says it to Laura. But it would seem to suggest that at least she doesn't think that Laura is the murderer in question. Whether that's true or not.
Yeah, she doesn't think Laura is. But the fact that she just throws in that she is capable of murder is like a real bizarre throwaway line to have in a whodunit. Anne, now I don't trust you. Even more than I didn't already.
Judith Anderson, like, playing really kind of twisted, Machiavellian kind of characters. But yeah. So then Mark, in the living room, Mark gets a call from one of his, I think it's probably his police chief, I want to say. And his chief is like, listen, what's going on with the investigation? He says, I'm just about to make an arrest. That's kind of why I've gathered everyone here. So they all kind of hear him say, he's just about to make an arrest, which shuts everyone up, and they all just go silent. So he says, he puts the receiver down and he says, okay, to Laura. He kind of looks around, he's looking around at all the different lovely little bit of direction from Preminger.
Is this one of McPherson's tricks again? Yeah,
it's such a good piece of direction from Preminger where he just lets the moment sit for a few seconds. Who is he going to go with? And then he says to Laura, okay, come on. And again, like, this shocks everyone. And Waldo's like, we're going to fight this, Laura. We're going to fight this. I know it wasn't you.
Bessie throws herself in there first, in fairness. Bessie screams at him. And she's like, no! She throws herself in between the two. And then, Waldo, proper JJ Hunt secretary. No, I have money, I have power, I have fame. I'll get you out of this. Yeah.
And Mark,
and a great one-liner, actually. A great one-liner. Mark goes, it sounds like you want her to go on trial for murder.
Yeah, it's a nice little moment. But also then Shelby says, I can't remember exactly what he says or does.
This is class.
But Mark just like funny. He just hits him in the gut, and it's like, yes, you've had that coming.
He hits him in the gut, and he says, it's a shame it wasn't you who opened the door. What sort of a fucking detective is this man? He's a psychopath.
Cold. He's a stone cold.
Yeah, it's a shame it wasn't you who opened the door. Basically saying, I wish you were dead.
So we get to the interrogation room, and Mark says to Laura, I know you're hiding something. You need to tell me right now what you're hiding, because it's not looking great for you at the moment. He's like, why did you lie about marrying Shelby? Because she had said that she decided not to marry Shelby. And she said she wasn't lying, that she basically changed her mind is what she's going with. But then Mark says he kind of almost at this point admits that he's like fallen in love with her, but he kind of stops himself just before. But I think she's starting to clock on to the fact that look, this guy is in love with me. Probably not the first man and not the last man either. But Mark says she says she doesn't believe Shelby is guilty, which is why she's been backing him up the whole time. But she says, I'm not in love with him. So Mark says, I'm letting you go, and I didn't book you officially. I just needed everyone to kind of see. I needed everyone to see that. So they've started to kind of connect, to use a Love Island term. They've started to kind of grow closer in this.
She also dispels the
interrogation scene.
radio thing with a pretty simple reason.
She got it fixed.
Well, I had a I had a technician fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, okay, fair enough.
Yeah, that's like Mark at this point is looking for any reason to rule her out as a candidate. So as a suspect, I should say.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah. Whatever she says, he's just going to be like, yeah, no, I agree with you. Okay, no problem.
That's fair enough. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. I didn't mean to arrest you. I'm sorry.
So then we cut back to Waldo's apartment, and the clock chimes. So the clock that Waldo had given Laura, it chimes, and he tries to open it, and then he just kicks it straight in. And because there's a false wall, so he's like, he kicks it straight in because he's not going to be able to get in otherwise. So then we cut to Laura's apartment, and Waldo tells Laura that he doesn't trust Mark, and that he knows that kind of Mark is in love with her. Again, he's had a history, Waldo, of kind of swiftly getting rid of people who he knows are growing close to Laura. So doesn't take a genius to work out what his plans are for Mark in that situation. But basically he's just trying to plant seeds, and he's trying to poison her against Mark, and he's trying to sway her opinion. But I think he knows that she's less likely to take his opinion on this stuff than she was in the past.
Yeah, he says, you better listen out to my radio announcement later, because it's all about, is it Lovers in History or something?
Yeah.
Basically insinuating that he is going to take Mark McPherson down using the power of radio.
Yeah. Again, Mark then walks in, and he tells Laura that the shotgun at her place isn't the murder weapon. So the cottage in the countryside, that's not actually the murder weapon, which obviously it would seem. Again, a little bit of a kind of Chekhov's gun kind of situation there. Maybe not. That's a bad actually analogy, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like, it makes it out like that's the murder weapon, but it's like, no, it actually isn't. So turns out that wasn't actually the murder weapon. Again, we're getting more and more evidence that it wasn't actually Laura. I think that's mainly what I'm trying to say here. And Laura tells Waldo, I don't want to see it again. So Waldo kind of leaves, and then when he goes out to the corridor, again his shadow is against the wall, and then he kind of, just as he's about to go downstairs, it's such a good moment. Just as he's about to walk downstairs,
typical sleazy Waldo fashion,
just stops himself.
He just stops, and he just has to eavesdrop on the conversation as to what it is that they're about to say. And they don't know that he's still there, because McPherson again feels for the hollow part of the clock, and he hits it, and what's in there? Just a double barrel shotgun,
the murder
hidden
weapon
in the clock.
Yes.
So McPherson says he doesn't need to say much here. It's pretty clear
pretty
what's
obvious,
happening. But he's basically like, right, you lock this door. You do not see anyone tonight. I will come back tomorrow, and I will drop the shotgun into the evidence locker. Don't touch anything, because we need fingerprints and stuff. Just get an early night's sleep tonight. And she's like, okay. And as he's going to leave, they actually kiss. And he actually locks the front door himself for her from the inside, and then closes it after himself. And he leaves. And then, Laura goes in to kind of get ready for bed. And as she's getting ready for bed, the radio comes on. And yes, the program of one Waldo Lydecker talking about lovers in history. And as all of this is happening, a certain door starts to open in her apartment. It's the door next to the clock, and from the shadows emerges Waldo. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out what's happening here. He takes the shotgun back out, and he starts slowly creeping towards her whilst his radio show is playing over the film. It's really, really, really well done.
Yeah, it's really great.
Meanwhile, outside, McPherson's gotten down to his partner, and he was like, I told you to trail Waldo. Why are you still here? He's like, because Waldo hasn't left yet. And he's like, oh no. So first of all, he goes, we better check the back door, which is a really clever bit of direction, because now you're like, oh my god, if they waste their time going to the back door, Waldo is literally going to shoot her. Like, don't waste your time going to the back door, lads. Anyway, Waldo is in the apartment, and he's let himself into her bedroom, where she's getting, or her ensuite, no, her walk-in wardrobe, I don't know. She's at a desk, and he's got the shotgun, and the writing is on the wall.
Yeah. So he criticizes the second-rate detective that is Mark McPherson, and he refuses to let Mark have her. pretty obvious what's going on, like what he's really trying to say here. Again, saying it without actually saying it, it's pretty obvious what's going on. So Laura just manages, Waldo looks like he's just about to shoot Laura, but she manages to just wrestle the gun away from it at the exact moment that the gun goes off. And obviously Mark and the other detective hear this, they barge in, and Mark kind of gets Laura to safety as the other detective shoots Waldo. Mark and his buddy then, obviously, they see Waldo fall to the ground, and a killer final line where Waldo says, "Goodbye, my love," and then he crumples and dies. It's a brilliant...
Yeah, and just showing the broken clock that he's shot as well, because he fired a shot at McPherson and he missed and hit the clock next to him instead. So it's just the clock absolutely destroyed.
So it was Waldo all along. Where's Waldo? It was Waldo all along. He was in love with...
He's 6 feet under now.
Yeah, exactly, So the whole thing is that he was in love with Laura and didn't want anyone else to have her, and he kind of got into a situation where it was, if I can't have her, no one can. So kind of a twisted love story, one-sided love story, I should say. It was Waldo all along. He did it. That's Laura. One of the most famous noirs, I think, of all time, it's fair to say. What's your verdict, Terry?
Amazing movie, amazing direction, amazing twist, amazing performances, amazing characters, amazing writing. 4.5 stars out of 5. I think it's a masterpiece. I think it's one of the best noirs ever made. It is essential noir. If you want to watch film noir and if you want to get into the genre, or vice versa, if you are a fan of film noir and you somehow haven't seen Laura, like me somehow before today, you gotta watch it. It's essential. It's amazing. Everything about it is amazing. It's rapid. It's borderline perfect. I know I didn't give it 5 stars, but it's borderline perfect. The writing is so good. I love how shady the characters are and how basically everybody seems like they're lying, and then that incredible twist happens halfway through, and now you're so lost as to what's happening, as to like the actual whodunit case. Like the case quite literally has just been blown wide open halfway through. Just as you sort of think that you kind of have a grasp as to maybe who done it or whatever, everything you once knew doesn't count anymore. It's brilliant. It's fresh. The film is timeless, I think. It is... it's beautiful. I love it so much. It's a absolutely essential noir. Like, essential is the key word for me here. And I couldn't recommend it enough. What do you think?
Yeah, I loved it again. I gave it 3.5 when I first saw it. I don't know why. Like, I really, really enjoyed it. But again, it's like my ratings are more instinct than anything. So, like, I'm not one of these people who like gives it a certain score and then falls within that kind of star rating system. It's more like, right, that's what I was feeling. I gave it 4 this time around, but like, it's a really, really high 4. Could easily have been 4.5, and probably should have been 4.5 in a way. The performances are all great, particularly Clifton Webb, who, again, I'm going to say it again, it chews the scenery up. And like, I think if Waldo isn't as charismatic and as compelling of a character as, I mean, obviously it turns out he's the antagonist of the piece, but just in general, like, he feels like a fully rounded character who, like, you can really see a character like that existing. Bessie is probably the only like good character in this whole thing. Like, everyone, even Laura, is hiding something at some stage or other and is lying their ass off. The way, like I said, the way that it makes Laura like feel like a 360-degree character, even when she's not on screen, even when you think that she's dead, like it really makes a dead person feel like the central character as well of the piece.
Yeah,
and it's really like. Not too many.
Such an interesting character.
It's brilliant, and then the incredible midpoint twist again just drops a bomb on the audience, and like you said, everything that you thought, everything that you had kind of had an idea of, just goes out the window, and it's like you're watching a completely different film at that point. Brilliant cinematography, great direction from Otto Preminger, great sets. Just everything you want in a noir. Lots of great use of like shadows and dark, kind of a brilliant score. Like I said at the start, a brilliant score that really adds to the piece. Like, it's a great noir, and if you're into noirs in any way, you really should watch this film. So yeah, it's a brilliant film.
Yeah, and yeah, that's as you said, that's Laura.
That's Laura. I think next
Uh,
week we'll do the what I've been watching because just time wise we'll
yeah,
be on this.
definitely.
So yeah, I think that's Laura.
Yeah,
Unless you
next
do you have
week
anything?
you can figure it out
Yeah,
yourself.
exactly.
We're
Yeah.
not telling you.
We're not
Yeah,
telling
yeah,
you.
yeah.
So
So
go on the Instagram
yeah,
and see if you can work out what next week's film. See if you can crack the case.
yes, exactly. I'd be interested because we are recording this before I've actually posted them, and you actually haven't seen the
Yeah.
the case. Oh, you haven't actually seen the case itself, so obviously you know what the five are gonna be.
Yeah.
But it'd be interesting to see. Yeah, I put a lot of thought into it anyway with the trying to crack it, and there is a way. There is a way of cracking the order as well in which we will be doing the films. It's all in there. It's all on that bulletin board. So yeah, try and figure it out next week
Put your top hat on,
for another episode of Noirvember.
exactly. Put your top hat on, your trench coat on, and see if you can.
Yeah, just start emotionally scarring people like Martin
Just start
McPherson.
smoking a bunch of cigars and stuff, and see if you can crack the
Yeah.
case. So yeah, that's Laura, directed by Otto Preminger, one of the great noirs. So yeah, next week we'll see what next week's episode is on next week's episode. But yeah, that's been episode 28 of the Golden Hour Film Podcast, and I've been Shane Mulvaney.
And I have been Harry Bailey.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and see you next week.